Welcome back. This is probably one of my favorite sessions, not only because I have friends who are speaking on it, but because I think it is very relevant to each and every one of us. By 2020, the Internet of Things, which is basically the next step of the Internet that's connected to everything in our lives, will have been so present that up to 26 billion devices and almost anything you can imagine is going to be connected to the Internet. From your car, to your refrigerator, to your medicine cabinet. Everything's going to be online in one way or the other. And all of this is going to be connected to even a larger network, known as the smart city. But do smart cities really exist? Or is this just another buzzword? Creeping technology, what role does the citizen have to play? And do we risk leaving back the less privileged, the less educated? How smart, how educated do you have to be in order to be part of the smart city? As cities become more technologically advanced, will you still have areas that can accommodate the less privileged? And do we risk having too much smart cities and too little smart people? So we're here listening to Parag Khanna, who's going to chair this session, introduce our guest. Thank you, Parag, for being here.
Thank you, Sultan. Anywhere where Sultan is a smart city, first of all. Sultan, Silver Shoe, Shimon, Turi, and in absentia, Antonia, this event, really, it gets bigger, better, more incredible every single year. Thank you guys for your outstanding leadership. I've been coming here for a few years, and I just find that not only obviously artistic content and your global footprint, but the intellectual caliber is just really compelling. So thank you. Delighted to be here today. I'm going to introduce our outstanding panel in just a second. Let me pick up on Sultan's comments. Just off stage, he was saying, we're going to focus on the technology and be less political. But of course, at the same time, his comments reveal that can we talk about that technology without talking about the politics? In a smart city, the two very much come together. Now, I think smart city must be one of the most polarizing terms in this entire industry and field of urbanization, which has become such a central meme of the 21st century and such a organic reality as the world becomes dominated by cities. Some view it as salvation. Let's bear in mind that Prime Minister Modi, just elected in India, one of his first declarations was, I want to build 100 smart cities. So from a perspective of a poor developing country, the largest poor country in the whole world, this is seen as truly a salvation to dissipate the population, to create better services and opportunities. And on the other hand, of course, it is also viewed as a specter. The specter of Big Brother, of the surveillance society, of all-powerful governments, and of, in a way, perpetuating geographic divides, spatial divides, by having smart cities that might only benefit the rich, wealthy, connected, and educated, and leave everyone else behind. Actually, I'm reminded of a question that Aisha often asks when we go to smart cities. She says, where are the poor people? Because a city is so artificial if it is not inclusive. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to let the panelists take the lead in exploring this question of the smart city. This being the Dubai Art Festival, we're not going to be so strict on definitions. We're going to be more aesthetic in nature, right? And we have three very different perspectives that are going to weigh in with their opening comments. We're going to have a free-flowing discussion. I want to see a lot of hands. I want to see a lot of interjections so that we have a good conversation in the limited time we have today. We're going to start with Noah Raford, who is speaking in his public or private capacity. Is there, in a smart city, it's hard to differentiate when the cameras are always on. But Noah has a distinguished career already behind him as an urbanist, a technologist, a scenario planner, now a senior advisor in the Prime Minister's office. We're going to have Amar Bakshi, who also is very, despite his youthful appearance and age, in fact, is a journalist, a budding academic, a legal scholar, as well now as doing a very interesting arts and technology project that he's going to talk about. And Aysar Arida, a first-rate global urban theorist who's written some very interesting work about quantum cities, and he's going to give us his perspective on the smart city as well. So I'm going to kick it off with Noah for a few minutes, and then we'll go around and looking forward to the discussion, everyone. Please.
Great. Thanks, Parag. Hello? Hello? Great.
Smart mic.
Smart mic, indeed. Thanks, Parag, and thanks, everyone, for having us here today and taking the time to come talk with us here. As Parag so kindly mentioned, I am speaking in a private capacity here, which means I can be more direct. The question of the smart city is a very interesting one, particularly because it is so interwoven with technology, and technology is a tool for doing things. So that always begets the question of, well, a tool for doing what, and by whom, and upon whom, or to whom, or with whom. And I think just in the broadest strokes, the big picture pop culture references for smart cities were really defined in the 60s and 70s by Star Trek. The aspirational vision of smart cities is this post-scarcity leisure society where you speak to the walls and the walls give you what you want, and your very needs are delivered before you even know you need them. So I want to sort of differentiate between these three levels of a broad vision of the smart city, the big picture cultural references of the city, the intermediate application, and then the bottom kind of technique, the technology that is enabling these things. And so for a long time, as we've been talking about smart cities, say over the last 15 or 20 years or so, there's been a big gap between our technical ability to deliver upon that vision and what we aspire to do with that vision. So in the best case, if we try to aspire to a post-scarcity world where everyone has what they need and everyone has what they want, and the toils and struggles of day-to-day life are taken away from us, the technology hasn't been anywhere close to that. But in the last, say, 10 years or so, 5 years or so, certainly, and if you start to begin to look at what's in the labs, in the R&D facilities now, and what's coming onto market in some of the more interesting startup spaces, we're starting to reach this very interesting point where, certainly not yet for everyone, but from a technical perspective, some of these aspirational visions could be met. So you have this interesting transition point where we have this broad brush cultural vision, and the technology is starting to reach the point where we could deliver on some of that. But in my opinion, that then reveals this very interesting gap, which is, well, what's the middle part, the application, right? If we have, we can always know where our phone is, or our phone always knows what our heart rate is, or our device can tell our loved ones across the country how we're feeling. The question begins to be, well, so what? A good friend of mine likes to put this as, well, it's great to have a toaster that can talk, but what if it has nothing to say, right? The Internet of Things is all about devices communicating with each other, but what are they saying, right? And this is the question which I feel like we are only beginning to really grapple with. If we have intelligent, quote-unquote, intelligent devices that are speaking with each other, what are they saying? What do we want to teach them to say? What are we hearing? What are they hearing? What are they gossiping about? And the intelligent toaster, the sort of intelligent fridge has become the example which was early on in the smart city literature was used as, your fridge will tell you when you don't have any more eggs, and then we'll order it for you and it will be delivered, and this sort of thing. Well, I would like to hope that we, in this room, and that we as society, we as human beings living on this planet this time could have better aspirations for our collective ability to do things than just putting more eggs in the fridge. And I don't think we have an answer to that yet. And as a technology juggernaut, and there are billions and billions and billions of dollars and momentum behind this Internet of Things type of technology, as that rolls on and gets more sophisticated and more available and more powerful, these sort of questions are going to become more important for us to ask, because if we don't ask and propose our own answers in the sort of artistic, critical sense, then someone else will be, and those will be the technology vendors. And of course, they're going to come up with answers that are going to be in line with selling you more stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I aspire to greater things in life, and I should hope we all should as well.
Great point. No, quick follow-up. The smart city conversation has tended to revolve around specific geographic settings. The Songdo, new economic city of South Korea, Masdar down the road from here, very specific geographies, these sort of artificial enclaves, special economic zones. Are you saying that because the price of technology is coming down so rapidly that, in fact, in the next few years, the smart city conversation should actually be global? It is everywhere. Yeah. Are we ready to really make that a global conversation?
Well, whether we're ready to or not, it's going to be. There was a project that recently was looking at the future of climate change impacts in Asian urban cities, most of which are going to be devastated, most of which are poor and most of which are coastal and will be devastated by flooding and tsunamis in the next 20 years. And so the question became, well, what do these smart city technologies have, what role do they have to play in these sort of devastated post-disaster environments? And the first time I'd heard a smart slum, the idea of a smart slum. So if you have, these ubiquitous streaming video devices that are super cheap and sensors everywhere, then it's going to be a very interesting world when you start to look at some of the example that was given to me was like some of the conflicts and gang warfare type things or Rwanda-style conflicts that are live-streamed everywhere to your phone. And the smart city vision, I think, is going to become more poor, more global, more diverse, and more open, with a totally different potential outcome than we're really envisioning it as.
Aysar, this is kicking it over to you because you've been a very multidisciplinary thinker about technology in cities. So please give us your take.
To begin with, thanks for having me here. It's a good opportunity to be back in Dubai after more than 20 years. It's a different world. It's wonderful. As an urban designer and as a geek, obviously the idea of a smart city is very much something that excites me. But at the same time, almost everything that I've heard and seen and read with these two words combined has raised all these alert flags in my brain. Why are we always talking about technology as the smart part? And who is providing that technology? Who is paying for that technology? Who's maintaining that technology? What are the, how open is this technology? How accessible? And then once you have the technology, who owns the software? Who runs the software? How locked in are you? And so on. And why talk about smart cities and not smart citizens? And do we really need technology to have smart citizens? From this other side is the notion of city itself. I mean, I've been discovering in Dubai how this fetish for this word city between media city and internet city and education city, and I think only the design district was thought to be a bit more modest. But what is this? I mean, even here we're in Medina Jumeirah, right? So let's re-question these words as well, not just the whole notion. And I'm sure there are other things that will come out as we speak about things, but also why not look at smart governance and not just smart cities? I mean, it's beautiful to have a smart city as a mayor and add it to your CV, to your resume. You know, I designed, I implemented a smart city, but what does this leave to the population after you're gone? These are questions I would like to discuss and raise here.
I know we're definitely going to spend more time in this conversation about smart governance and smart citizens, but I just want to ask you, because you've been outside of this city for a long time, but also traveling a lot, where are you seeing the most efforts to actually cultivate smart citizens, whether or not they're using technology?
Right. I mean, I come from the least smart city in the world, Beirut, right? And
no, that's not true because it's survived for thousands of years.
That's my point. That's my point. Is that, and from a technological or infrastructural point of view, it has nothing, but it's very robust. And I think this robustness is something we can learn from. There are other fantastic examples of smart governance in South America, for example. I'm thinking of the example of Bogota with the crazy mayor who one of the things he did, he figured that if the policeman cannot regulate traffic, let's put mime clowns, and it worked. So I mean, what happens if you try to be more innovative in the way you run things and not just in the way you accept the sales pitch of big name corporations who are trying to just sell you their technology?
Now, this is a perfect segue to Amar, because he is a true cultural innovator and a global citizen, because he's the model answer to what does the smart citizen look like in a smart city. And you're also replicating this now across multiple cities. So with that tantalizing introduction, tell us more.
Thank you, Parag, and thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be on this panel with you guys. The proposition I'd put forward in line with what both of you just said is that stupidity is an essential part of any city. And smarts are really about instrumentalization. How well do you get from point A to point B? But the question is, what is point B? And that cannot be resolved by smarts. It has to be resolved by something else. And that something else, I say stupidity, but it's what I'm focusing my work and life on. So with that, Does this slideshow turn
The
on?
Stupid City by Amar Bakshi.
That's right. Or at least
Roll, cue video.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, that's kind of odd looking. It doesn't normally look like that, but it's okay. This is a big gold shipping container, and individuals enter it one at a time, and they converse with someone in another city as if in the same room. The idea is to put these all over the world, and we started. Well, I started in my parents' backyard, and this is playing with the optics to see how do you make there be the illusion of continuity in a neutral space. I'm not sure if the color is, well, how to make the illusion of continuity. And so about a year ago, I started playing with this idea, and through a friend got connected to Sohrab Kashani, who runs the Sazmanab Center for Contemporary Art in Tehran. And over the past year, we've been communicating through these portals, well, through a portal, to try to create a public art initiative between our two countries, which we did this December at the Yale University Art Gallery and a gallery in in New York. We connected to Sohrab Center in Tehran and invited the public to enter one at a time for 20-minute sessions where they spoke to a stranger about what would make today a good day for you. The idea was the mundane. I want to take my kids to soccer and I hope my daughter wins, that sort of thing. And so over the course of several weeks, we had over 1,000 people have these conversations. And what was surprising to us, I think for both of us, and they're private, I should say these are private conversations, we don't record this, so that's why these are video stills from other entities. What was remarkable is, for us, how deeply moving it was for people, not just in one way or another, but there was an intensity of the experience. And I think that's because, and people wrote these long essays in the book in both Tehran and New York after they left, there was an intensity to the experience because you're in a neutral space with someone else, decontextualized to a certain extent, and the encounter was de-instrumentalized. By that I mean, you're not in there swiping left or right on Tinder to determine whether you're dating the person. You're not likely to ever see that person again. And you're sort of alone in a bus at night having an encounter to pass the time out of raw human curiosity. In many ways, I think it's like the disinterested pleasure we get from works of art, except it's a human being, and the disinterested pleasure is in learning about that life. The whole premise and why this thing is gold is about making the mundane sacred. Now we did do some other things in the space. This is an artist named James Karoni, who's an Iranian-American dancer. He had never performed live for his family before in Tehran. They'd only seen him through YouTube, unidirectionally. He performed live in the portal and in Sohrab's apartment, where the first portal was placed in Tehran. The second one moved to Sazmanab Center. They watched James perform and engage his family. It was deeply moving, I think, for everyone who was involved. Now, so we had these artist performances. This is the kind of collaborations we did. So this is a jazz musician in New York playing with a tombak player in Tehran composing. So, beautiful artistic products came out of this. Over 24 artists collaborated. Let me just get through it. And then finally, we've also opened these up for sort of sixth graders to talk to Masa and her team in Tehran about daily life, what sixth grade is like in Tehran. And one of the things was Masa's friend there is in the middle, a ballet dancer did a ballet performance for these teenagers in New Haven. The teacher said, they've never been that still, they've never been that attentive. And really the questions they asked were quite beautiful. So now one portal is traveling around the New Haven public school system. I guess the final point is, these shipping containers, there are a lot of them. They're all over the place. They're pretty cheap. The technology we're using, the camera is a customized lens we worked out that is really affordable. And the vision is to have these all over the world permanently so that people can enter New York, Tehran. We're adding Herat, Afghanistan, Havana, Cuba, Washington, D.C., and Detroit just in the next few months, and then police community within the United States. I think the final point is just this disinterested engagement across forms of distance and difference enable us to be fuller citizens. And that citizenry is dependent on it being de-instrumentalized, it needs to be not smart. And I think, just looking at our politics from the United States perspective onwards, the lack of dialogue, the lack of capacity to speak in a disinterested manner leads to all sorts of things that no amount of smart city could heal. That's it.
Amar, this is awesome. I think we need to give Amar a special applause here. Just phenomenal. And a couple of very important takeaways. First of all, picking right up on what Ayssar said, this is inexpensive. Shipping containers are cheap and everywhere, so it's not about money. It's also low tech, as he was saying. You've told me offline how inexpensive the camera technology is, and you don't even need the high bandwidth.
No.
So this really can be, he just said Herat, Afghanistan. They do not have Google Fiber in Herat, Afghanistan. So this really can be, can universalize very quickly.
But
so
it's
very
gold
impressive.
plated.
So a smart
Very
city
expensive gold.
then also is gold plate. Well,
Art
gold paint.
Monaco emailed and said, "Is that real gold?" And I was like, "No, it's just spray painted gold."
So Fast and the Furious crew is not going to hijack your thing. Okay, that's good to know. So a smart city is connected internally, and you've demonstrated the smartness that can come from engaging citizens across the entire planet, which is definitely something we would agree is it would be an element of a smart city. Now, there's just one very simple bombshell question that might occupy the next 40 minutes of this session, and I'm not going to delay even 2 seconds in asking it. Is Dubai a smart city? Who wants to start? Who wants to dare? Because this is a loaded question. I'm gonna let the mayor of Dubai start.
All right, well, I will take a punt in a purely personal capacity here. I would say yes, but for the very reasons that my co-panelists are articulating here, that Dubai is a very smart city because it is such an effective social integrator of diversity. Perhaps not economic diversity, but social diversity in terms of drawing people from all different walks of life, from all different parts of the world. It's not an exaggeration, 2/3 of the world population is within an 8-hour flight. So that is an extremely powerful integrator, and the ability to integrate that in a way which doesn't generate strife and conflict is an extremely intelligent system. In my
Absolutely undervalued virtue of this city, without a doubt. I want to open it up actually to the audience right now rather than later, and we'll go back and forth. So please, if you have views on Dubai as a smart city, and anyone who's lived here or been here enough times is going to have an opinion on this place, please raise your hands as well so I can bring you into the conversation right away. In the black shirt. Just pretending I don't know your name. But let's get a microphone to Mr. Anshul, and he can identify himself, please, and please let's hear your question.
Hi, my name is Anshul Arora. I'm an educator in India, so by no means an authority on anything to do with smart cities as such, but trying to help develop smart children. I was here at an event last year, and someone from the government was speaking at the Address Hotel. And what he was saying is that, 10 years ago, what that square kilometer looked like was practically barren land, army barracks, if I remember correctly. And he was saying today it's the most sophisticated 1 square kilometer in the world, from the Burj Khalifa being the most sophisticated real estate construction to the Dubai Mall, which is the most sophisticated fashion place that you could find. And that evening, I then sat with some friends who live here, and they were saying, as you said, it's a very, very cosmopolitan place with people from all over the world, but yet we don't, and this is something I hear constantly, is that yet we don't feel this integration between different societies. So if you look at 65% of people coming from South Asia, whether it's Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, and is there true integration from that part of society which does very different type of work than, let's say, the elite, cosmopolitan, urban, high-end human capital. And so my question to you is, that's the stereotype of Dubai from outside. It's very sophisticated in some ways, but it lacks culture, warmth. And I'm not saying I subscribe to it or don't, because I don't know the city well, but I'd love for your reaction.
So how do we, it's a question that's applicable to many global cities actually. How do you overcome the stratification? Integration, yes. Diversity is there. It's there in New York, it's there in London, it's there in Dubai, it's there in Singapore. Each of these cities is also immensely socioeconomically stratified with the ethnic composition as well. Any thoughts on that? By the way, there should be a box in Dubai Mall, don't you think, Amar?
I was just going to say on that point, two sides of any one city are perhaps the most relevant pairings you could imagine. And we started with Iran-US because it's so dramatic, but ultimately I think police community in the US, and I couldn't speak to Dubai, but police to community in the US would be just as powerful because there's such a lack of dialogue right across the street.
And Ayssar, your thoughts on urban planning, given the reality of the stratification, how can it be a tool to overcome it?
I don't think there's any city in the world today that's not stratified anyway, and I don't know if it's humanly feasible to destratify the world. But at the same time, I think there are a lot of issues linked to the smart city that we haven't even pronounced today, that are mobility and about activating public space to make it easier for people to meet in the most basic way possible. What I want to question is the cities like Dubai are extremely top-down by design. And if you try to compare it to, let's say, Beirut in this context, which is, I don't know if it's bottom-up, it's just nothing in terms of, it's totally, it's an accident of chaos and order in the best sense of both words. And the question becomes, can you actually smarten a city that is not top-down? Can you? Is it even? I mean, not technologically, but epistemologically feasible or thinkable? And
where would you see? So I mean, China is full of top-down examples. India would be a good place to investigate. And I don't think you can rule out the technology. It's not that just because technology is involved, it suddenly is a corporate exercise. So Bangalore is a place where a lot of low-cost, bottom-up technologies and networking of just individuals is actually helping to untangle what is just another incredibly messy, overcrowded Indian city. So there's a role for technology, but it wouldn't have, with the transformation of that city, wouldn't be possible without smart citizens who are taking the lead. So it's one of hopefully several more, but I would love for us to find more examples of the challenging cities, because a top-down rich city like Dubai, right, is an easy case. What we need is solutions for a world of cities that have 10 to 20 million people or more.
Can I just respond to that? I mean, I think one of the most intelligent neighborhoods that I've seen, and I didn't visit this personally, this was from a trip report that a friend did, was this mammoth slum Kibera. And they were describing to me the supply chain of plastic recycling that goes from people picking things by hand in the rubbish bin, breaking it down by color and density, and it's all human labor. I mean, like, everyone's doing, but every single ounce of value that was in that rubbish heap was decomposed and then melted down and then made into cups. So there was this extremely complex, intelligent, articulated supply chain, reusing everything in there. And I would argue that is the sense of complexity and integration is quite a good example of smartness with the zero technology therein. And you look at some of the archetypical examples like Masdar and these other international smart cities, they're extremely sterile and rather simplistic in many ways.
But these are things that we know from science and biology. You put a chaotic system and with enough agents in it, and it will end self-regulating if it needs to self-regulate. If you give it all the order it needs top down, it doesn't self-regulate. So it doesn't find these solutions by itself. Favelas and all informal economies are based on self-regulation. But I think what's interesting if I want to mix Amar's project with the idea of these 20 million people cities, is that on one side we're looking at the smart city as a way to transform every citizen into a statistic, and then we gather all this data from everyone and transform it into pure quantitative information that algorithms work on to either send a metro that way or not. And on the other side, we have the individual relations that are created through technology, which bridge different types or send different types of messages and information. So how can governments learn how to think as much about the individual as about the statistics?
And this might be to some paraphrase what you were saying earlier. So Dubai is a top-down city. It's forever being built out in a top-down fashion. But your concern is that a smart city needs to be a place that has public spaces that can be utilized spontaneously for social purposes. Now, so even though Dubai is so new, you're saying it has to be retrofit, because it was built in a way that is lacking those essential qualities that would make it a smart city. How do you go about retrofitting a smart city? We talk about retrofits in the context of old and broken cities, But this city, to be smarter, you're saying has to be retrofit. How is that going to happen here in this city? Give your free advice. And others now. I'm going to take another round of questions in just a second.
I think there's the opportunity, because it's top down, to maybe rethink certain things about how the building regulations affect space, right? I mean, we know something in urban design is that we use space to make us smarter. I mean, even behavioral psychologists and children psychologists will tell you that a child learns from his physical environment, and it's such an important thing. And if you move around Dubai today only by car and or buses or even the metro, and whenever you are in a space which is limiting your most of your experience to just consuming, I find it hard to see how this can create a smarter citizen long term. So maybe education, just to make a quick loop, education is one aspect, and I think Ayesha would agree that if you implement like citizen education or civic education in the view of creating citizens, I mean growing citizens in the literary sense, until they actually become the users of the urban realm, I don't know, maybe that's one key.
Amar?
I was just going to say these issues of code, and the logic of these systems that develop of smartness is atomization. I mean, it is the idea that you segment people into little nodes so you can better track them. I guess one question is, can code, in that sense, be orchestrated in a more communal way? So you sort of have large-scale crowdsourcing. You've had these sort of hyper-local attempts. But it's not clear, if there's a trash problem in a local municipality, it's not clear that people on their own, through the technology that exists, have really come to a good way of resolving it. Meaning, the government's done a better job using smart tech than at the local level, but there's no reason they couldn't. I guess, the question becomes, twofold. One, what is the government's role if it was more bottom-up? Like, what does the government need to do? And then secondly, what does the tools that we create and the way we disseminate them, how does that organize behavior? How do the incentives that exist financially and otherwise organize behavior? So to put that in a more clear way, I think the role of the government is increasingly important, perhaps not in a top-down way of imposing smart, but in thinking about space and thinking about code and thinking about things the market won't resolve, to code in a different way, to think about public goods that can be constructed digitally, but that exist according to a different logic.
So but this is precisely an issue. I mean, in the context of Dubai, is there a sufficient community-ness, identity, belonging that's developing either on a large scale or even at a neighborhood scale, where you could hope that suddenly you would have this spontaneous emergence of civic, sort of public goods management. This is what Elinor Ostrom's work was all about, right? Can citizens self-organize in this way and tackle these environmental or other public goods issues? Is there any example from Dubai of that happening at a local scale? No?
Yes, I mean, you look at some of the food markets on the weekend and previously in Safa Park and now in Zabiel Park. There are some of these examples and some of the initiatives organized along the beach to make the beach more active. Right. And also I would push back just super slightly, very gently, that it's only a top-down environment, because my job ultimately is to talk to as many people as possible and hear really interesting ideas to take to leadership. So there's a tremendous consultative, conversational dynamic to the way decisions are made here. So I don't think it's entirely fair, although the execution is often extremely top-down. Yeah. The conversation around decision-making is extremely communal. But I just wanted to, one thing which you mentioned, I mean, I'm not quite sure. I guess part of the critique about sort of neoliberal global urbanism is that it tries to make every place the same. And there is something unique about Dubai, which is its Dubai-ness, which is the fact that it's not very local. Right? And I don't mean that in terms of nationals versus non-nationals, locals versus non-locals. It's a place of tremendous churn and flux. People come in 20 years ago and they come back 20 years. You come for 2 years, you come for 10 years. It's this constantly churning place. And I'm not sure it would be fair or doing it justice for what it is to compare it to like, a New York or a San Francisco or something, which themselves are extremely churning as well, but more local examples where people come and communities gestate over 20, 30 years or 2 or 3 generations, and then that has those sort of qualities of streetness that we equate with urbanism.
I would argue you don't really need to change that. And I mean, when we talk about top-down versus bottom-up, it's not, we're not placing any value on one versus the other. Certain contexts need the bottom-up, other contexts function perfectly well with the top-down. It's just not, it's just questioning if too much reliance on the top-down is removing some of the robustness, long-term robustness. When you're in a controlled system, that's fine. I mean, you can keep doing the top-down implementation, to use the way you framed it, as much as you want. But what happens if anything goes wrong? Can the system fix itself? Maybe it did. I think what happened, the crash that happened a few years ago in Dubai, seemed to have reset itself to I don't know enough about the strategies that were implemented to fix things, but it seems to me that Dubai managed to get itself back.
Definitely want to echo, by the way, something you said earlier and extend it. You know, Dubai is judged far too much by outsiders in comparison with other global cities that have a 1,000-year history, and that's very unfair because it is a new kind of global city, one that doesn't necessarily have to have those same benchmarks. It'd rather to be here is to belong to everywhere rather than to dig yourself necessarily so deep the way others have done, and that's not nearly appreciated enough. Next round of questions, beginning with this gentleman right here.
My opinion, having lived in New York, in Los Angeles, in Berlin, Germany, and this is my second time in Dubai in 7 days, and I'm really excited to be here. The idea, so I'm going to introduce 3 concepts. The first one is techno-social wormholes, meaning that we can be in one place and like teleport ourselves as you do anywhere in the world and kind of communicate and talk to other people. The other concept that I want to introduce is cultural operating systems. So we have, you know, in Berlin is different than New York, is different than LA, is different than Hong Kong, and so on. And then the third one I want to introduce is this idea of increasing collision means increased serendipity, increasing wonderful things to happen. And so this is my opinion of Dubai, having been here 2 times in 7 days and 3 times total. Keeping in mind that, you know, as you had just mentioned, this city is young. It's 40 years old. When you look at London, which is 1,000 years old, and you look at New York, which is 200 years old, you have, you know, this amazing playground of technology that's built on amazing technological infrastructure. And so with that, I think having it been built so fast, like I've been staying at this hotel and going to this place and going to that place, but I've never been able to walk anywhere. I've never really been able to take the subway anywhere. So I haven't been able to have that collision and that increased serendipity. And I think, you know, that only comes through culture, and that only comes through people kind of creating these spaces to play, kind of like, you know, this idea of Wikipedia, as they built 50% of Wikipedia as a jungle gym, and then, you know, the community built out the other 50%, and they were able to see which way Wikipedia was going to go. And I think having this culture be so young, and this kind of, these different cultural operating systems coming in from all different places around the world, you guys really have an opportunity here to kind of learn and see and build like a metaculture over the top of it, and then use that kind of rapid iteration to see, okay, where do we need to put a park? Where do we need to do some more cultural things? Or how can we create, you know, a walkway from this place to the other place and, you know, increase serendipity? Right. And I'll just end with this last note. You know, New York has this kind of, this idea. It's a very old but very small city, and, you know, for anyone who's been there, I think it feels from the outside pretty massive, but when you're actually inside New York, you have these little places and you bump into people. When I first moved to New York, I thought it was like a high school hallway. Like you would walk down a street and you'd see like 3 people that you know. And I think that's cool. And so, you know, again, you guys have a tremendous opportunity here, and I think, you know, you have a new house and people are just moving in, and now you guys, as a culture, have to decide where to put everything.
Well, thanks for adding some great new nomenclature as well for use in Noah's work and for future sessions. And also, you know, for anyone who's concerned about a point that Noah made earlier about this neoliberal urban project as creating homogenous sorts of cities, some of the places you've been, Los Angeles, New York, and especially Berlin, we need not fear that just because places get on the map, they're going to be identical. Because anyone who's been to Berlin knows that Berlin is quite different from any other place, and so is Dubai. So I think that we should be celebrating the rise of cities like this because they are not going to be all the same. So the more we have, the more diversity we have, and the more we can learn across. I'm going to take it over to this gentleman in the white shirt, please. Yeah.
Hi, it's Vivek. It's a very specific question. From when you have a high flux of tourists, right? How attractive is a smart city to a tourist who's coming? Because you have a 2020 target, and how does this align with the 2020 target of tourism?
He's referring to Dubai's 2020 vision to be the world's smartest city. You probably wrote that. No, but he's speaking in his private capacity. But let me just clarify. Is your question how does the smart city serve the tourist? Is that the question?
How attractive is as a smart city to tourists? Yeah.
Right. Anyone want to tackle that? Ayssar?
I think Dubai has enough, pull without that, to be honest. It's not, it's not about tourism. It's a business hub, and it will remain a business hub. And the world is growing, and there's more cities in the world. So if the idea is just to compete on becoming a destination for tourism, there's going to be a lot of more competition as we progress. And it's not how smart it is that will win that competition.
Yeah, I would just guess that to the extent smartness is homogenous, to the extent certain smart processes are similar, and to the extent a tourist seeks diversity, strange encounters, unexpected, it seems like smartness wouldn't help. I know from personal travels, the things that are off, that are imperfect, are those that are most interesting. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I'd be curious what you guys thought about smartness and whether there is a logic to it. That, because obviously there's certain things that we can all agree on that smart cities help us get closer to doing. But I wonder, to the extent they're the same, those processes are similar in different cities. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
Let me just respond to that, because I think getting back to the point I made at the beginning, that we're in this transitional period. Right now, I've seen some really interesting examples of Dubai using augmented and virtual reality to try and differentiate itself as an interesting place to be. So these 360-degree immersive experiences, which let people from anywhere in the world, not come and sit in this room right now live, but functionally come and sit in this room and explore it. And so I think that until everyone in the world has a function like that, it is trying to differentiate itself through these types of specifically immersive and virtual reality experiences as a draw for tourism. So I think that is an interesting kind of, particularly in this moment in time, an interesting appeal for people, because also part of the work that some colleagues I know do, definitely not me, is around making Dubai sort of a center of the future, an emerging center of the future, the capital of the future, if you will. That instead of going to Silicon Valley, which is what America's future looked like 60 years ago, you come to Dubai to experience what Asia, the Middle East, and the rest of the world's future is going to look like. So if you want to experience what the future of this part of the world, or the emerging part of the world in North Africa, Asia, etc., is going to be like, come here, right? Don't go to Silicon Valley. That's America's vision 40 years ago. So that sense of futurity as a tourist attraction, I think, is particularly interesting, and how much smartness plays in there is a good question.
Sites within the city are attractive because of their smartness, and you've, of course, just had a major breakthrough recently with the announcement of this very significant museum of the future that's going to be located here in Dubai. So congratulations on that. We're going to take a Twitter question channeled via Sultan.
We've got a couple of questions. One is, what is the role in a smart city for bureaucracy, especially in countries where bureaucracy plays a big role in government organizations? The second question is, what if something goes wrong in a smart city?
Okay, let's two totally different questions.
Can I start with the last one?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
I remember
from the city where a lot has gone wrong.
No, I remember. I remember when we were kids. So it's just way before the notion of smart city. There used to be this joke that later group of people go up in the plane and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the very first fully automated flight. Be perfectly secure. Nothing can go wrong. Go wrong. Go wrong. Go wrong." Right. So and anyone who has had to press Control-Alt-Delete on his PC knows that things can go wrong the more there's technology involved. That's why the idea of robustness, how can we build in robustness in any system? So maybe, bureaucracy is the top example of where things can go wrong, and maybe you guys can tell us.
No.
I think that's super interesting because actually, you look at bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is often equated to be the most slow-moving, kind of innovation-stifling force or soul-crushing force in the world. And I think that has utility because those types of slowing mechanisms, those geologic mechanisms in terms of society, are useful to prevent things from changing too fast. The more you optimize and the more change responsive you are, the greater the likelihood that you're just going to go off and freak out and system crash. So I think this question of bureaucracy is super interesting and important because you look at, I'm not very optimistic about the future of bureaucracy, given that so much of what governments do in terms of transactional services is essentially go off and freak out and system crash. So I think this question of bureaucracy is super interesting and important because you look at, I'm not very optimistic about the future of bureaucracy, given that so much of what governments do in terms of transactional services is essentially pencil pushing, paper pushing and stamping and that kind of stuff, which is totally being eaten by software. 5, 10 years, 15 years at maximum, mostly 80 to 85% of what governments do is going to be essentially software, like eaten by software totally. And so that raises this really interesting question then, well, what's the role of government? What's the role of bureaucracy in these new environments? And someone I know, definitely not me, worked on a very interesting project about the future of government services in this environment in 20 years. And this idea emerged that, well, if you have 80, 90% less things to do as a government, right, then you need 80 to 90% less civil servants, which has particular implications here, given the workforce distribution. But then you free up civil servants to be more relational and more like people, and you train them to be as opposed to a sort of essentially a biological computer, which is what they are right now. So your job as a civil servant, as a bureaucrat, is to help people deal with the more complicated and ambiguous emotions that surround kind of complicated edge cases and be more of a human being. And you're then, as a representative of the relational state, your job is to help people out in the public services sense of the word. And I think that's an interesting concept. And one other idea that came out of that project was around the role of government as platform, which is an older concept that Tim O'Reilly came up with, 10 years ago or 8 years ago or something. Ancient time, yeah. And the idea is that, well, government maybe becomes a platform that certifies different service providers. So if Art Dubai can do a better job at educating students about art than the Ministry of Education, then the government just simply is there as a trusted certification provider. And they say, okay, great, Art Dubai. You go to Art Dubai and you spend 6 weeks in Art Dubai, then you're going to be educated about contemporary art. So instead of providing the services directly, instead of just purely privatizing it like they did in the UK or in the US with education systems and the public infrastructure services, it's just you're ensuring a certain degree of participation, but other people are doing it themselves, which is a very non-bureaucratic, bottom-up way of thinking.
So that makes Turi a
It also reduces corruption, right?
It does. It reduces corruption. And if you get really far down this, and I'll apologize in advance, but like, the blockchain, which is the technology behind Bitcoin, there's some really radical edge thinking going on right now about blockchain as a mechanism for independent autonomous organizations to run without bureaucracy. Just look it up. Blockchain governance. It's really
let's
amazing.
go to the gentleman in the back right by the cameras there. Is there a camera for him? The one with the jacket on.
Thank you.
There you go.
So quickly, two observations. One regarding Dubai. I moved to Dubai less than 2 years, and I made a similar tour than a gentleman here. I lived in LA, I lived in New York and Berlin, and when I came here, I was really surprised. I came here and I didn't know what to expect. I came because of love, and I was really. And she's sitting right next to me, and she's been here for 20 years. So
Left or right?
left. Sorry. So I came to learn very fast about this city, and I was really amazed. And she was very surprised how I became a defender of Dubai, a big-time defender of Dubai, for anybody coming and criticizing Dubai. And I think one thing that for the critical eye that we usually have as human races, nagging about everything and criticizing, is that top bottom, there is a feel that Dubai wants to become the best it can be for the human population living here. And this decision is felt in all areas. So I'm really happy that I live in a city that is determined to live the best possible future that it can. And this is all the impulses that we're getting from top down is how we can create the future that is the best possible future. And comparing to other societies, other democracies which are failing around the world, top is corrupted and I say hopelessly selfish. Here we have a model of a virtuous aristocracy in a way, the ideal of a Platonic state in a way. And this is my personal observation. Okay,
right.
So
let me just, I'm sorry to interrupt, we're running low on time, so I'm gonna have to.
Okay, and the second thing, I would just like to raise the bar. Look, please.
10 seconds.
Yeah, 10 seconds. Raise the bar. I would really like to sit in a panel that will speak about the city of consciousness and not smartness. Because it's time for human race to start living in a conscious city and not in a smart city. We messed it up. Sorry for taking so much time.
Okay, obviously one of my favorite metaphors from Quantum City, which is unlike what the title might suggest, it's a look at how the way we understand the world affects the way we design our cities, as simple as that. And is looking at everything in the city as a particle wave, a physical thing that is either fixed or moving around, but that has with it this wave that spreads out in space and time and interacts with other waves, right? So we're not talking just Wi-Fi, we're talking emotions, we're talking consciousness, we're talking ideas, we're talking culture. And so this, I think, wraps back to this notion that smartness is not just the technology, it's not just the quantitative, it's the qualitative, it's the relationship we have together. I mean, probably, how many people here were actually born and are from Dubai? So 5 out of 80, maybe?
That's pretty much tracks to the actual demographics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, every other citizen is bringing with them their own city. So this is what is making Dubai. It's not the infrastructure, it's not the smartness, it's not anything. It's these hundreds of world cities that coexist and interact. The question is, how does this, and I don't want to be too polemic here, how does this affect the original Dubai citizens? How do they live this? How do they interact with the world?
Good point. Okay, in the interest of smart efficiency, I've got to take 3 last comments who I've already identified. Lady in the front, gentleman over there, and then Mike over here. So 1, 2, 3 in a row, and then closing remarks and responses from the panel.
Having grown up here, I have a question about free speech censorship, because when you say things like smart city, it's really, in order to have consciousness, in order to be intelligent, you have to first identify what the problems are, because that's about problem solving, really. So over here, I find that there's really a culture of a lot of sort of what you say, like patting yourself on the back about, look how far we've come, which is great, and that's necessary and important. But the flip side to that, of course, is a critical culture that's required in order to progress into a direction that's relevant. So my question to you, or comments from you about the role of free speech and censorship here, which, as you know, with the new cyber laws, make it kind of there's a pretty dangerous gray zone there.
Great.
Especially for innovators.
Great. So keep it in your heads. Question 1, let's go take over here. Yeah.
No. There's one
yeah, we're going to, he'll be third. Yeah.
First, I think it's been a fantastic panel, and thank you all, including the moderators' input and interaction. It's interesting. My name is Mike. I was an architect, still am an architect and a planner, and focused on the whole evolutionary changes of healthcare since the late 60s to just a couple of years ago. But it's interesting that as you talk about each of your respective perspectives on smart cities, I agree with the gentleman who just spoke a moment ago I think we have to get away from the terminology of smart cities, because when you have smart cities, then what else do you have if you don't have smart cities? And that is going to be a label that I think it's unfortunately is going to be carried by so many of those organizations, facilities, countries, cities, whatever, demographics that aren't going to be able to have the technology or the leadership to get them to that point. Which leads me to my second thought, which is, how do you establish the prioritization of what is important so that the smartness or whatever the characteristic of the consciousness that you're going to be bringing to the table for, whether it's a city or a village in remote India or it's in suburban Dubai, that's going to allow them for a framework to achieve an advancement that is going to be beneficial to the majority of the citizens.
Great question. Okay, so that's third point over there.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm only asking this because you brought up Silicon Valley, and I've just recently come back from spending 2 years there, and whether it's a smart city or not is very debatable, especially when you look at the aspect of the impact that it's had on the lives of people. A lot of people know Palo Alto. What you don't hear a lot about in the papers is just across the bridge is East Palo Alto, which is one of the poorest areas in America that haven't seen a dime of the influx of wealth that has come into Palo Alto. So my question is what do you think the role a smart city has to play in the future of creating this social mobility and opportunities for people that don't have access to this technology today?
Great questions. So, Amar, you want to go first?
Sure. Smartness is no cure for dysfunctional politics and dysfunctional government in any sense of the word. So smartness in a certain way is a distraction. I mean, it's useful, but if you don't have a system that people believe in, what's the point in it being smart? It could be counterproductive in numerous ways, NSA surveillance being one extreme to lack of free speech being another. Just to bring it back, I think one of the more important things right now is to resist the urge to atomization, to force ourselves out of comfort zones and out of our own networks, and not to rely on code or smartness to do that for you. Consciousness is one way of doing it or otherwise, but fundamentally these technologies have to be grounded in communities and in people that utilize them. Portals, for example, are never left alone in the city to be smart on their own. They are kept by artists, they're kept by community leaders, they're kept by hospitals, they're kept by institutions. And I think that if we just, smartness is valuable, it's great, efficiency is worthwhile, but it should not be a surrogate for addressing the deeper issues, which are how do we choose to organize ourselves as a society. And the best way to do that is to converse through and across distance, because, from social science on otherwise, those who, I've gone over my minute. But those who tend to have the most animosity, xenophobia, homophobia, etc., haven't met people or don't know they've met people from that different group. And of course, you can meet people and your intolerance can grow, but in aggregate, it doesn't seem to. And especially when you're outside of your performative group, when you're alone with a stranger, and that's why it is one-on-one for portals and not three-on-three. You don't perform for one another. You engage with someone in front of you. And that, at root, has to be driven by each of us and not by any system.
So game theory still works in the smart city. Good point. Ayssar.
What was the question again?
You can answer any of them, but take 1 minute to do so.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Turi's giving us an extension.
I remember this question. I really don't remember the second one. I think. No, I don't want to answer this one because I will probably. I won't be able to answer it in the.
Any closing thought? How about what comes after the smart city?
Let's just.
What term would you choose?
Okay, if these are closing comments, then we're not talking again. What I worry about is that 20 years ago, and Mike probably recognizes what I'm talking about. As an architect, the big thing 20 years ago and for the last 20 years was sustainability and green building, and there's been a lot of greenwashing. Like anytime we just put some green on a building, it becomes sustainable, whatever. And I'm worried that. And now we're starting to do smart washing, and how can we go beyond that and just focus again on the idea of smart as a metaphor, not just as a model. forget about the hardware and the software for a bit and just really look back at the human and see what we can get out of it.
Great point. Great. Noah.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful conversation, and I guess what I would just ask us all to do is to these questions of income inequality and of social justice and the ability to integrate or not integrate conflicting opinions. I think that these are the questions inherent in this these smart city dialogues. And while smart city as a concept, I've sat on many of these panels, is almost always technology led. It's a metaphor for the larger questions of who we are and where we are and what we want to be. And so we should constantly try in every one of these conversations to bring them back and address those questions as to who we are, where are we, and what do we want to be, because those are the the essential questions, I guess, of higher consciousness, not in any kind of hippie metaphorical sense, but in a what kind of society, what kind of future do we want to have? So yes.
The answer is yes. Now, it would be futile to attempt to summarize this conversation, but I'm glad that so many people here and in the other room and the way in which the crowd has grown in the last hour is a testament to how intelligent the insights have been. So thank you so much.